Good evening, everyone. Hello, welcome. I'm Chrissy Gregg. I'm the Associate Vice President of Education, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the National World War II Museum's commemorative program for International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Tonight, we mark the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. On this day, 80 years ago, the Red Army entered the gates of Auschwitz, shocked by what they witnessed. Remaining at the camp were 7,000 frightened prisoners who were near death and the evidence of horrific and unthinkable acts by the Nazi regime. At Auschwitz alone, 1.1 million people were killed. Tonight, we remember those individuals who were murdered at Auschwitz and the 5 million other Jews killed by the Nazis across Europe during World War II. Tonight, we also remember and hold close the survivors of the Holocaust. We are incredibly lucky, truly privileged, to be able to hear their stories firsthand. It is our responsibilities as witnesses to history to share their stories with others. In doing so, we can see each other in our full humanity, with our full shared history, and in all of its ugliness and even all of its beauty. This is more important than ever in the troubled times that we live in. I hope you were able to read some of these stories of survivors upstairs on our second-floor landing. There you will see a select display of photographs and stories from survivors from the digital art project, Humans of the Holocaust. Photographed by the grandson of a Holocaust survivor, Erez Kaganovich, Humans of the Holocaust pairs compelling contemporary photographs of survivors with their own remarkable life stories. In his work, Erez hopes to bridge a cultural gap in society to bring understanding, emotional connection, and unity around the world. The photographs displayed above us are only part of the entire collection, and the remaining photographs can be found online at the Humans of the Holocaust website. I encourage you to check it out. The collection upstairs includes some of the photographer's choice pieces, along with stories of survivors from Auschwitz. It will be on display here at the museum through January 31st. This evening, we're also incredibly grateful to have Holocaust survivor Jack Cohen with us to share his story. Mr. Cohen was born in 1932 in Greece. After Germany and its allies invaded Greece in 1941, Mr. Cohen's family attempted to keep a low profile until Nazis began arresting Greek Jews in 1943. Mr. Cohen and his family went into hiding, sheltering in a Greek Orthodox monastery for nearly 2 years. Mr. Cohen immigrated to the United States in 1955 and lives in Tennessee. Mr. Cohen will be interviewed and joined on stage by his daughter, Sarah Beth Cohen Wilcox. Please join me in welcoming Jack Cohen and Sarah Beth Cohen Wilcox to the stage.
Take a seat. Who's joining?
Wherever you'd like. Hi, everyone. Today we honor the 6 million Jews, the victims of the Holocaust, and we bear witness to the stories of those survivors. But when you hear the word Holocaust, a lot of the times your mind goes to the carnage of what happened at the camps. And there's widespread anti-Semitism that was in Germany. We still see some of that today, which is why it's so important to be here today. But my dad's story is one of hope and humanity. So although he'll tell you some of the stories as he goes through, he wants you to remember just the survival part of it, not the terrible part of the death and the destruction. So we'll start by just going over a little bit about what his life was like.
Let me have the cards.
Oh, here you go. Daddy, why don't you start with where you were born and what life was like?
I was born in the second island in the second largest island of Greece called Evia, and on the largest city named Chalkis. As you heard, I was born in 1932 and staying in Greece. That was a peaceful town, and people normally would occupy themselves, the men, of course, with commerce, friends, and family. And for us children, was going to school and play around the neighborhood with both Greeks, Christians, as well as Jewish children. But that peace was abruptly interrupted when the Germans invaded and occupied Greece.
You want to tell me about your parents? Tell me about your parents.
Okay. My father was a successful businessman and a cosmetic chemist. He spoke 7 different languages, including German and Italian. And he made a lot of friends, especially with Italian soldiers who would frequent the store to buy cosmetics.
What did Yaya do? What did your mother do?
My mother was a seamstress and a baker, of course. And she was taking care of both myself and my younger brother. That's it.
So what were the changes that you witnessed when the Germans occupied your town?
When the Germans occupied the town.
We have bullet
Okay.
points.
Okay, our home was very close to the barracks, the German barracks. And it was hardly a day that we would not wake up to the machine gun of people killing. They would load them on a truck with hay. In front of the truck was a guard and another guard behind the truck. And behind those, there was the fire department truck that was washing up the blood that was spilling down the street. As children, curiosity, of course, when we heard the noise of the torch coming by, I would open up a little bit the shutters and try to see what's going on. One day, it seemed to be that there was one young fellow that was not dead. He was just wounded. And right in front of us, on the window, in the street, he jumped the truck. The rear guard signaled, they stopped, they killed the guy right there and then. They loaded him back on the truck, and they just left. Seeing that with a child's eye was devastating.
Was there despair in the community? Did you see other community members?
There was hunger. There was despair because people were hungry since the Germans were taking most of the food from the country to feed themselves. The fear was also widespread. People that would go to a cafe to have a cup of coffee or to a pastry shop, they tried to sit as far back from the front door because at any moment, for any reason or whatever, the Germans could have come and blocked the place and start picking up people from the front, either to interrogate them or as hostages.
Did you have any encounters with the resistance?
Yeah. We as children, of course, used to play soccer. And at that time, no parents would spend money to buy us a soccer ball. So we implementing. We used to try to find a sack and load in, stuff it with paper or discarded clothes or something, tie it up with it and use it as a sucker. There was a mosque in our hometown, remnants of the old Ottoman Empire occupying Greece for 400 years. And in front of that, there was a square where we used to play soccer. One day, there were two guys that came in, and actually they gave us a ball. Not a soccer ball, but nevertheless, it was a real ball. So, but there was a catch to it. They wanted us to kick the ball. By the way, the mosque was converted into a munition depot by the Germans, and there was a guard in front of it. So the people wanted us to kick the ball to the guard as often as we could. Well, the beginning was a joke, was a play. We kicked the ball to him, he kicked back to us, and so on and so forth. Until one time, when we kicked the ball to him, he took his bayonet and busted our ball. We started calling him names and jeered him and all kind of stuff until at one moment we saw him taking the rifle off his shoulder. We scattered. For some reason or another, he followed me. And as I was turning the corner over there, he took a shot at me. But thank God, I have already taken the corner, and I didn't get a shot. However, another child that was crossing the street at that time took the bullet that meant for me. Later on, I found out that those two people were people of the underground or the resistance. And while the guard was away, they had the opportunity to throw a couple of grenades in there. It did not do much damage. Nevertheless, 110 people paid with their lives. They took them up to a hill, they shot them, and they left them there to die.
Let me go back just to let you know. So we did go back. We've been back to Greece to visit family many times. So that was the last yearbook picture before they went into hiding. I just love his little face. All right, so at this point, it became almost impossible to leave, and there was a cold early morning on March the 25th that coincided with the Greek Independence Day. And that would be when all of the people were roused out of their beds and sent to the seaside that they loved so much. They would be placed in trucks, and unfortunately, there was a holding camp called Haidari in Athens, and most of them ended up in that holding camp. I'm going to go back one more time. One of the things that I like about this picture at the very bottom is that if I'm picturing what my dad and his brother and his parents were taking when they went into hiding, it would look pretty much like that bundle that that lady has at the bottom there. So if you can imagine when they get ready to go into hiding, that's pretty much all they were able to take with them. So these are some headlines, and at the bottom you can see that's the old Haidari. So this is my grandparents' wedding picture. So my father and his immediate family were able to flee in time, but his grandmother was not so lucky, and that's the one that's got the arrow. They were very well known and beloved family, whether they were Jews or Greeks, it didn't matter. Everybody loved my grandparents. And so this was actually in a lot of magazines, which is why we had that picture. So at the time when you know that a lot of people had the armbands and the Jewish stars, this happens to be a child from Rhodes, and he thought that he was proud to wear this star. He had no idea that this was something that other countries were being forced to wear. Other people in other countries were being forced to wear. So when others were rounded up and wearing these golden stars, he was proud. So Daddy, I want to ask, did you know what would happen when you were that age if you were picked up by the Germans?
Yeah, even then, I knew exactly. First, I knew that by first experience. Then my father, who also spoke English, he would go sometimes into somebody's home that had a clandestine radio in the basement, and he would listen to BBC. Then when he came home, he relayed those stories to my mother and maybe my uncle if they were there. And of course, we were there, and I heard a lot of those stories. So I knew exactly what would happen to me if we were caught by the Germans. My father had to make a decision back then, either to be passive and die, join the resistance and be a short-living hero, or stay alive, survive to witness the genocide, and preserve for history and educate future generations.
So my grandfather used to work in Athens a lot. He had a cosmetic business. He was a chemist. And so in his travels back and forth, there's a whole nother story. I'm not sure if my dad will mention it, but Italy came first into Greece. And so the Italian soldiers were there. When Germany took over, they sent the Italians home. But they really didn't go home. They sent them on boats, and they blew up the boats when they got in the water. So my dad's family actually hosted 2 of these Italian soldiers in order to keep them safe. That's how he got into the resistance movement. That's how he had his connections. So he went to Athens, and he said, okay, it's time. We need to go ahead and get papers. It's obvious that we are going to be in some danger. So they went from the Cohen family to the Athanasopoulos family. And my dad became Antony Athanasopoulos. So, Daddy, how do you remember the night that you had to leave your house?
Late at night, some people came to tell us to be ready, that we had to leave the next day. In the middle of the night, my father woke me up and asked me to get a bag and fill it in with items that I wanted, not knowing where we were going and for how long, and whether we would come out of that alive or not. My mother got some bedding, some pillows, and blankets, and a few utensils, a couple of pots and pans, and made the bundle. And the next morning, when those people came to pick us up on a one-horse-driven cart, we just went with them and let the Lord, whatever destiny He had designed for us, to be so.
And where did you go next?
At first, they took us to a small village right outside the town called Vasiliko. People were struggling. It was bad enough to feed their own family, much less for feed another family of 4. they put us in somebody's town named Roosters. We stayed in their home for a while. And the guy took us in and fed us and all. And then somehow they found a way to feed 4 more people. And they were 4. There was the father, the mother, and 2 daughters. And yet 4 others over there, they made to feed all of us. That place was too close to town. And the Germans would go through, when they wanted to go up north of the island, would go through the village. That made it very dangerous for us. The penalty for anybody that would shelter a Jew was death to the whole family, and their home was burned. So we decided to move from there and go somewhere else.
So this picture always amazes me. My dad is the one on the bottom right, and he looks so happy, doesn't he? He looks like he's smiling. But you can see that my dad is on the left. My grandmother is on your right, on the very far right, his mother. And she looks scared out of her wits. So it's very interesting, just the survival of how the parents had this burden of trying to keep everybody safe, but they were still together as a family, and I think that's how they survived. Now, the gentleman in the middle at the very top happens to be the resistance fighter who is engaged to the woman who is in this family. And although we don't know a lot of the stories because a lot of our family members haven't spoken and they ended up passing away, we do know that this family is one of the righteous families and did host 2 other of our cousins that were passing through. So at this point, the resistance fighters had come, knowing it wasn't safe anymore, got them on a mule, and took them up the mountains. Now, when my dad tells you that he walked up the mountains, he doesn't really explain that top picture of just how treacherous it was to get up there. So when we went back to visit, we had about 5 flat tires to fix on our way up there. But we did go, and that bottom picture is the first time we went. So, Daddy, why don't you tell us about the St. George's Monastery?
After staying with the Russo family for a few days, then we moved to a monastery called St. George. That was about 3.5 hours from the nearest civilization. Everything was deserted except a man and his wife were taking care of the monastery. The room was not made, they had some rooms around there. The rooms were not made for a long stay. The pavement was of clay. There were no windows, just a door. There were no lights, no running water, no toilet, and of course, no telephone. The question came up right away of survival. What do we do for food? Number 1, we had no money. Number 2, even if we had money, there was nowhere around there where we could buy anything whatsoever. Fortunately, the lady gave us some bread, gave us some feta cheese, and some olives, which lasted for maybe 2-3 days. Then what? Again, fortunately, the man took me around the woods in the forest and showed me how to find and pick up and identify edible mushrooms. My mother would take them, boil them, and make patties out of it. And we have a fireplace, and she would bake them over there. That's one thing. The lady also told my mother that there were plenty of greens around the hills, like dandelion. My mother would take it, clean it, boil it, and make a salad out of it. And that would survive for a while. But there were some of the resistance, some people of the resistance that occasionally would come to the monastery to pray, and they would bring in some supplies. And that survived us. We had no idea that we was going to be there for 2 whole years, yet we survived them.
I took this out to save time, but I think it's pretty interesting. Daddy, tell them about the charcoal. Tell them about how you went further.
Not having anything to do over there, I was roaming the mountains and just play around. One day, I saw a smoke coming out of a small plateau over there that we had right next to it. I was curious, and I hid myself in the bushes to see what happened. There was a man over there that had a big thing like a big igloo, and smoke was coming out of that, and the man was sitting over there watching it. I stayed there for a few seconds, for a few minutes actually, and the man was just sitting there. So I approached the man and asked him what he was doing. He said, "I'm making charcoal." I asked, "How do you make charcoal?" He said, "You come here, I don't remember, a week or 10 days or so, and I'll show you how to do it." And sure enough, I went back there when he came, and he showed me how to do it. So I went back to the monastery, and I told my father. My father was very skeptical. But the fact that we could not survive for the rest of our lives with mushrooms and dandelions, he gave a thought to the idea, and we made a small kiln of charcoal, and worked. It made charcoal. So we made the bigger one, and my mother and father, we put in a bag and walked down to the nearest village to make sure there were no Germans around or coming, and they would trade the charcoal with a little bit of oil, some flour, and something, and occasionally with a chicken. So, and that really helped us survive the rest of the time over there.
Well, tell us about what
Yeah.
your uncles had been taken.
My grandmother was taken by the Germans, and my two uncles, fled to the Middle East. My father was skeptical that though we were on a remote place, there was still a chance that the Germans would come there. So he decided we want to go to the Middle East as well. So one day, he and I were set to go to the underground headquarters in another village. So we got up in the morning and we walked to go there by directions only. There were no roads, no path, no nothing, but we knew where to go or follow the sun. We came up to a river. We went up and down that river to find a bridge so we can cross it. But there was no bridge to be found. Our frustration and dilemma were solved by two guys that showed up out of nowhere. They asked us what we were doing there, who we were. And so my father said that we tried to find a bridge to cross the river. Now the river was strong and seemingly deep, so we discussed the idea of swimming across. So they took us a little bit further up the river, and they helped us go across. That was another sign that the Lord would keep us alive and help us. We found the underground headquarters, and my father made arrangements for people to pick us up and take us to a small cove and take a small fishing boat that would take us to the Middle East. We came back to my mother and father in the monastery, and we sat up there waiting in hope that somebody would come to pick us up. Sure enough, a few days later, two guys showed up with two mules to take us there. However, when we woke up the next day, there was a blanket of snow on the ground that made it impossible for us to go over the mountain to go to the cove. So they said that they make some other arrangement and they will come back later on. A few days later, some of the underground, some of the fighters came there to the monastery to pray, and we found out, they told us that the boat we were supposed to have taken was intercepted by a German patrol boat and blown up. Again, that's another indication that the Lord will keep saving us.
You missed one. I'm gonna go back and show you this one picture. So we did go to the monastery again a few years ago, and it's just really interesting. You can see how small the door is, how short the door is. Daddy, do you think did you recognize the monastery when we went back?
Oh, yeah. People would not believe me today what we went through that monastery. Like I said, there was no running water, no electricity, no telephone. But believe it or not, today they have everything. And not only that, but there are people building all over the place over there.
So, Daddy, at this point, it got dangerous, and you found out that the boat was blown up. So what happened next?
We discussed the idea of going, and we stayed there. Now, again, later on, the resistance came back, and they tell us to be ready to be moved from there again. They found out that the Germans were combing the island, actually, and of course they would find us. So they came one night, and they picked us up through the forest, and we went behind the German lines and back to the home and the family that we went originally, the Russian family, and we stayed there until the liberation.
So what did liberation look like for you?
One day, we woke up to the church bell ringing like we never heard it before. We didn't know what happened. We walked out to find out that the Germans have moved out and the Americans have moved in. And people were rejoicing, and so did we. Our personal liberty and people were able to move around as they pleased, while before, when the Germans were there was a curfew, and there was a blackout, and there were all kinds of restrictions. Now there were no restrictions, and of course, the Americans were not taking the food that we're supposed to eat.
So
My parents, after that, my parents went back to town to check the home, to check our home. And he came back, and a few days later, we went back to that home.
So this is the story that always gets me, because I'm going to ask him what they found when they went back home. And what you would think would happen is the exact opposite, which is what I think this story always gives me hope of humanity. So, Daddy, what happened when you guys went back home?
We found out that our home was occupied by a Greek family while we were going. There was a family of 7 people: the father, the wife's sister, and 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. And then 4 of us, my father, my mother, and 2 children. And we had to stay together. Somehow, some way, we made to be amicable and stay together. Our home was sectioned. We had 2 bedrooms and dining room, living room combination, 1 kitchen, 1 bathroom, and 1 washing room. We stay in 1 bedroom, and they stay in the other. The kitchen and the dining room were shared by both of us. They would eat early most of the times, and would eat later. There was no trouble. But the sore spot was the bathroom. There were 11 people to go to the bathroom. Now, the husband of the other family and the older child were fishermen, commercial fishermen, so they were not there all the time. However, they came there too. So my father had to get ready to go to work, and we had to get ready to go to school. Had to go to the bathroom, wait, clean ourselves, comb our hair, our hair, and all this. And that reminded me of a joke that I heard from our famous comedian, Bob Hope. Bob Hope said once that he was raised in a large family, and the reason he learned how to dance was waiting to go to the bathroom. and so did I. Eventually, they moved out. They found a place to move, which was not easy, because back then in our hometown, we did not have apartments and things like that where you could rent them. So they had to find a room, a home or something that either the people have died or something to be occupied, and they moved there.
So I was telling this story when we were at lunch, so I'll share real quick that it's pretty interesting that you lose so much of your life for those years, and you don't think of it if you imagine your neighbor not showing up at home for a week. Maybe they're out of town for 2 weeks, for a month, for 2 months, but 2 years. And to think that they could come back and just live harmoniously until the other family found a place. But that still doesn't mean that all of my grandmother's dowry is gone, that years later they would have dinner at a friend's house in the neighborhood, and they're eating on my grandmother's china and with my grandparents' silver, and the daughter of a family gets married and she's wearing a dress that my grandmother's mother had given as a dowry. And what are you going to do? I mean, it's life. You have to live it, and you have to just be glad that you have your life and your family together. So, Daddy, one of the most important stories about your survival is how the church was involved. So tell us about that.
The Greek Christian church was very, very helpful in make the Jews of Greece survive. The Archbishop of Greece Maccabees. Am I right? Yeah, the Maskinos, I'm sorry, the Maskinos. He sent a letter to Hitler himself, stating that we do not have distinction between Christian and Jews. All of us are Greek citizens. And of course, he never got an answer, but he did say that. He also sent notices to all the priests and deacons I think in the whole country to do whatever they could to help Jews survive, which they did. Our bishop in our hometown, Gregorio, he picked up all our archives, our sacred books like the Torahs and the prayer books, and hide them in the bottom of his church, and he returned them back after the war. In the meantime, the German general in our hometown went to him and gave him 24 hours to give him a list of all the Jews, names, address, telephone numbers, and so on. When he went there to pick him up, there were only one name on the list, and that was his name. They put him under house arrest, and later on they sent him to Athens and kept him there in house arrest. There was there's a small island called Zakynthos. Again, it happened the same thing. The German commandant went to the bishop, Chrysostomos, and the mayor of town, and asked him to give him the list of all the Jews in the island. The next day, when he went to pick up the list, again, there were two names, the bishop and the mayor. In the meantime, during that night, in 24 hours, remember, but during that night, they've been able to scatter the Jews, all the Jews, on the island, so not a single one was missed.
So to give you an example, in Holocaust, where my dad was born, there were 325 Jews before the war. After the war, 303. So a very, very little perished. So at this point, my
The
dad...
chief of police?
No, I said how many people...
The chief of police.
Oh, go ahead.
The chief of police in Athens, he issued 27,000 full identities to Jews in the whole country. And there's another, also, the police also helped. My mother was picked up too, and I was saved by the police.
There were a lot of stories of when they were picked up that my grandmother knew someone or my grandfather knew the language and so he could translate. So at this point, they're back in Holocaust and they're rebuilding their lives. The bottom, or the long picture is my dad's elementary school, and the picture with everyone in front is my grandfather's store. You can see Koen is the name Cohen in Greek, so you can see that on the sign. So my grandfather had been able to get some loans back from Athens and from other countries, and he was able to build his cosmetic business. My dad and his brother made up 2 years of school so they could get back in line with their schoolmates. After graduation, my dad went to the University of Padova in Padova, Italy. He got his doctorate of chemistry. But while my dad was away, we never asked specifically about this with my grandparents, but there was political unrest, and for some reason, my grandfather wanted out, and he, I'm assuming, was afraid of this happening again in his lifetime. So he told my dad, "We're going to America. You can stay here, you can come with us." But they survived by being together. Why would he be the one to separate them? So after he finished and he's got his doctorate in Italy. He came back to Greece, and the four of them came to America. So in order for the family to stay together, the Federation had to find two sponsors in one place. My dad was over 18, but his brother was under 18. So in order for one sponsor would have the parents and the child under 18, and the other sponsor would have to have the child over 18. So Memphis, Tennessee happened to be where they found it. So my dad and his brother and his parents came to Memphis, Tennessee in what year? What year did you come?
And we came to the United States in January 29th, 1955, and we came to Memphis a week later, the first week of January of 1956. I'm not sure of the exact date.
So then they started their life back in Memphis. Both my father and his brother enlisted in the Army. But because my father had sole responsibility of caring for his parents because they were older and my dad was the only one that could get a job at the time, my uncle, my dad's brother, ended up getting sent back to Germany. He never told us how he felt about it or any of the stories of inside, and unfortunately he's passed away. My dad did work as a chemist for the reserves. And he went to a dance at the Jewish Community Center, and he couldn't speak English, and he was kind of greasy. Sorry, honey, I know you don't like me saying that. He couldn't speak English. He was a foreigner, and he asked my mom to dance, and my mom said, but you're not getting my phone number. After that, he ended up getting married to a woman. They had a son. They got divorced, and he was set up on a blind date with my mom. And what did you say when you met her?
Oh, I recognized her. She never recognized me, but I recognized her. And I thought, if that woman marries me, I'm going to marry her and punish her for that, for rejecting me to begin with.
So, Daddy, what was it like? Did you experience any anti-Semitism after the war?
Yeah, I did experience one. One time in school, we had a new teacher. We never seen him before. I don't know where he came from, but we never saw him. And he went down the list of the names of the students and came across my name. He said, Isaac Cohen. He said, are you a Jew? I said, yes. He said, how come the Germans were not made soap out of you? And that was it.
So,
And then we never saw that guy again. I don't know what happened, but we never saw him again. He never teach us.
so this is you can see the picture of my dad and his brother, my Uncle Mario Ephraim. And this bottom picture was soon before he had a heart attack when my uncle passed. Oops. And that was recently when we went to the St. George's Church, and it's my favorite picture to see this little Jewish man, this little Greek Jewish man with the icon of St. George that saved his life. So this is the hard part, is actually having to face the anti-Semitic rhetoric that is then and still today. So there are pictures that are at the top are from the 1940s, the top right, and the pictures on the left are from within the last 2 years. So the picture at the top in red, you can see that's something we took when we were in Israel, and at the bottom on the brick wall, we took that when we were in Greece. So when we say the never again phrase, it can happen again, and that's why it's so important for us all to be here and to remember. With anti-Semitism at an alarming high right now, I think it's really important around the world to remember that there are deeper divides that people have, and that's why it's important to speak so we can bring everybody together at the same time. So we were at a park at home nearby walking around, and there was a family that were using chalk to play in the park on the concrete, and they were drawing swastikas and anti-Semitic rhetoric, and nobody did anything about it. And so I wonder if I'd ask, I'm not sure if he came up with an answer for this, we didn't practice this one, but what does it mean to you when you see these currently?
Well, really, the only thing I can say is that those people over there that did that are either ignorant or, I'm sorry to say that, stupid. Of course, it made me sad to see things starting all over again and have the anti-Semitism back in the world, which I thought it was already gone. And that's it. That's all I can say. So those people were, that it didn't worth thinking about it.
My dad always seems to have hope in everything he does, but for us looking at it, it's seeing hate all over again. And when there's hate, there's hateful words. When there's hateful words, there's hateful actions. When there's hateful actions, you can go visit the Holocaust section of the museum and see what happens. So I think it's really important. So when you leave, he'll have a message for you of hope. And I think just if you could walk out and remember that words matter, that hateful words can turn into hateful actions. So when you came to America, there were cultural differences from Greece. So what kind of things did you experience?
First, it was hard to find work, not knowing the language. That's one. Another thing that came up, of course, the difference were the work. Back in Greece, we worked 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. But there was a siesta between 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the afternoon. People would go back home and have lunch with their family and take a nap, and then go back to work. But over here, it was difficult to have 30 minutes to eat. So I couldn't go to a restaurant. I did not have time to go to a restaurant. So they told me that I should bring some sandwiches from home. What is a sandwich? I never heard of it, and I never had one. So, but eventually I learned how to do it. So I was unfamiliar with the social situation and challenges that started with the civil rights issue and everything else. And I had an experience in the bus that a friend of mine finally explained to me what happened and why that experience came by.
Why did you have that experience?
I was very dark because a cousin of mine and I used to swim all year round, and we never lost our tan. I was very dark. I had a black, wavy hair and a mustache back then. So I got to the bus, and it was almost packed, but there was a seat right in front, and a lady was sitting next to it. So I sat there. And that lady pulled on the side and pulled on the side and pulled, and kept looking at me, kept looking at me. I look over there. I took a bath this morning, I shaved. What's happening? So when she left, when she took off the bus, she gave me that look that you actually could kill. So later on, I went to a Greek restaurant, a friend of ours, and I told the story to the guy. And he said, "Jack, have you looked at your face today in the mirror?" I said, "Yeah, what's wrong with me?" And then he explained that I was so dark, and she thought that I was colored, and I was supposed to have sat in the back of the bus and not right in the front. That's another experience that I've had.
So he lost 2 years because of his faith, and then he comes here and experiences differences because of his skin color. So Daddy, when you were in the monastery and when you were taken away from your home, how did you keep your faith?
We Jews, of course, celebrate uh, Sabbath, Saturday, and starting the night before, on Friday night, my mother would take a bowl and put water there and some oil on top. And around the country, she finds some fibers and make a wick out of it and put it there and light a candle every Friday night to welcome the Sabbath. So that in the middle of the night, in the dark, that flickering light gave us hope for a better life and a quick liberation, hopefully.
And so, is there a message that you want, as we're closing tonight, is there a message that you want
Yes, I
people
do.
to remember when they leave?
When you live here, think about the world we live today. The Holocaust is a contemporary issue and demonstrate the atmosphere of genocide to take place again. People connect to prejudice that are unfounded and illogical. Our society urges us to be tolerant. I think there is a great difference between tolerance and acceptance. And keep it here. We all have something to contribute to this world. By accepting things as they are, without carrying a judgment, we are able to treat all the people in dignity and respect. Thank you for coming here today. To educate people of what happened during World War II with the genocide mostly, and and I think that our society is urging us to be tolerant. I think there is a great difference between tolerance and acceptance. And I'd invite people to think about it, because by accepting people as they are, and by accepting things the way they are, then we hope for a better world and to treat people with dignity and respect.